Fort Dickerson, situated on this high mountain just south of Knoxville. To my right, a main thoroughfare, and to my left, just out of sight through the trees, is the river. This site was chosen for the defense of Knoxville. The powder magazine was built to protect the powder and ammunition. The magazine was constructed of logs and set below ground level with a layer of earth over the roof to protect the powder. The logs eventually decayed and the roof collapsed, leaving the depression in the center of the fort. This is one of the gun emplacements. They call them gun embrasures. Of course, the wall that used to protect the gun is long gone, but down here is the dry pit. This dry pit would then allow defenders to look down upon anyone attacking. Fort Dickerson. Linking with the other hills south of the river, this Union position was a major factor in the defense of Knoxville. Occupied on November 1st, 1863 by 2nd Brigadier Colonel Daniel Cameron, 3rd Division, 23rd Corps, its gunfire broke up an attempt on November 15th and 16th by Confederate cavalry, which had come via the Sweetwater and Maryville to seize these heights in Longstreet's bid for capture of the city. Fort Dickerson, defending Knoxville. The Knoxville Campaign. On November 4th, 1863, Confederate General James Longstreet led 2 reinforced divisions from Chattanooga to attack Union General Ambrose E. Burnside's garrison at Knoxville. Burnside confronted Longstreet below Knoxville, then withdrew on November 17th. Longstreet followed, besieging the city. In Chattanooga, Union General Ulysses S. Grant's army defeated Confederate General Braxton Bragg's forces at the end of the month. Grant ordered General William T. Sherman to reinforce Burnside. Longstreet withdrew on December 4th as Sherman's 25,000 men approached. Sherman soon rejoined Grant. By late 1863, the Union Army had turned Knoxville into one of the most fortified cities in the country. Chief Engineer Captain Orlando M. Poe used civilians and slaves to assist in his 300-man engineering battalion, while Union General Ambrose E. Burnside marched south to block the Confederate General James Longstreet's approach. Upon returning, Burnside's men joined in the digging and surrounding the city with 16 forts, batteries, and miles of earthworks. The 2 dams to flood the area just north of Knoxville. 3 of the forts, Dickerson, Higley, and Stanley, loomed on the ridges across the Tennessee River. As Confederate infantry advanced on the river's north side, Longstreet sent 4,000 cavalrymen under General Joseph Wheeler through Maryville and Blount County to capture the heights overlooking the river. General William P. Sanders, however, blocked Wheeler with 1,500 Federal cavalrymen, slowing the Confederate advance and allowing Federal troops time to prepare the defenses on what was to become Fort Dickerson. Arriving at the base of the heights on the land side, the Confederate cavalry found the slope too steep and the defenders too numerous for a successful attack. After 2 tentative assaults, they withdrew and rejoined Longstreet. On November 25th, Confederates attacked the earthworks on Armstrong Hill, adjoining the site of Fort Higley, driving the Federals from their trenches. Union troops rallied and forced the Confederates back to their original position on Cherokee Heights. A Confederate diversionary attack took place in this area 4 days later in conjunction with an attack on Fort Sanders. The Confederate defeat in November of 1863 was largely due to Poe's design of Knoxville's extensive fortifications. Fort Dickerson, 1863 to 1864. Fort Dickerson was one of 16 federal forts and battery emplacements constructed around Knoxville during the Civil War. Temporary earthworks were thrown up here in November of 1863, designed by Captain Orlando M. Poe, Chief Engineer of the Army of Ohio. The fort was completed between December 1863 and February of 1864 by the 21st Ohio Artillery Battery. This irregular-shaped fort was constructed of earth and timber with 25 gun embrasures, openings through which cannons could fire, and thus enabled the defenders to move a cannon from one area of attack to another. Only 4 to 6 cannons were usually stationed at the fort. The forts surrounding Knoxville were named for federal officers who had died during the Knoxville campaign. Fort Dickerson was named in honor of Captain Jonathan Dickerson of the 112th Illinois Mounted Infantry, who was killed in action at Cleveland, Tennessee. Fort Dickerson, rising 200 feet above Knoxville, and the Holston, now Tennessee River, was flanked on the west side by Fort Higley and on the east by Fort Stanley. These forts were designed to protect Knoxville from the south and guard the roads from Maryville and Sevierville. The fort came under direct attack only once during the early stages of the Confederate General Longstreet's campaign to capture Knoxville. Confederate General Fightin' Joe Wheeler was ordered to take the heights opposite Knoxville, and with 4,500 cavalry surprised the Federal cavalry outpost at Maryville on the morning of November 14th, 1863. The sound of the attack alerted General William P. Sanders' Federal Cavalry Division of 1,500 men, who were headquartered a few miles away at Rockford. Although vastly outnumbered, Sanders stubbornly fought a series of delayed actions that enabled the Federals to dig in rudimentary earthworks and man the fort with both artillery and infantry. The surprised Confederates found not only cavalry, but also infantry and artillery waiting at Fort Dickerson. After exchanging artillery and small arms fire, Wheeler was convinced that the heights could not be easily taken due to the formidable height, steep slopes, and unexpected firepower. Wheeler decided that further attacks would be too costly for both manpower and time, and the Confederates retreated southward, joining Longstreet's force after the Battle of Campbell Station on November 16th. On November 25th, 1863, Fort Dickerson served as a support during the fighting at Armstrong's Hill, west of the fort. For the next year, it served as a base for several actions against the Confederate cavalry, which made incursions to test Federal strength. To the end of the war, Fort Dickerson continued to be and fulfill its role as one of the guardians of Knoxville, protecting its back door, the vital pontoon bridge that was connected to the city with loyal areas to the south. Fort Dickerson has survived for 140 years, but is now a mere shell of its 1864 strength. The parapet, which once sheltered the soldiers with its 6-foot walls, is now barely knee-high. The gun embrasures are marked by mere hints of depressions in the walls, and the collapsed powder magazine is just a shallow depression in the fort, and is now partially filled with earth. Abuse and overgrowth and erosion from wind and rain have ravaged its strong design, but Fort Dickerson still stands as an enduring reminder of East Tennessee's role in the Civil War.
What brought the armies of the blue and gray together at Knoxville? Knoxville was a pro-Confederate town of some 3,700 persons when Tennessee seceded from the Union in June of 1861. It was the commercial and light manufacturing center of East Tennessee, a region of considerable agricultural importance that provided large quantities of wheat, corn, pork, and other foodstuffs to areas beyond the Great Valley of the Tennessee River. Lying near the head of navigation of this great stream, Knoxville, which also sat astride the South's most direct rail link between the Confederate capital of Richmond and the geographic region of the Confederacy that lay to the west of Appalachian Mountains. To the north of the city lay vital mountain passes that controlled access to Tennessee from Kentucky, passes that would be of critical importance and military importance during the Civil War. With the majority of the population of East Tennessee remaining loyal to the United States, Knoxville was a Confederate island in a sea of Union sympathy. For almost 2 years, the liberation of East Tennessee from Confederate control had been a dream of the administration of Abraham Lincoln. The American president held a great fondness for the loyal citizenry of the region, but it would require more than the president's affection and concern for East Tennesseans before the Union Army would attempt an invasion of the Great Valley. Late summer 1863 found both the favorable conditions and the military imperative necessary to undertake this invasion. In Kentucky, the Union's newest army, the Army of Ohio, had been assembled under Major General Ambrose Burnside for the purpose of invading and occupying East Tennessee. In August of 1863, this army swept into the valley with one of its 2 corps, the 23rd, marching through the Cumberland Mountains towards Knoxville. The veteran 9th Corps slowly returned to Kentucky from service in Vicksburg under U.S. Grant and rejoined the Army of the Ohio in Tennessee after a few weeks of recuperation and refitting. This federal invasion had become necessary for a number of strategic reasons. The first reason was to cut a railroad link running between Virginia and the Western Confederacy. 2, to deny the rebels the vital food-producing region of the East Tennessee. 3, to gain control of the strategic mountain passes through the Cumberlands. 4, to liberate the largely Unionist population of the region from Confederate domination. And 5, to deny the South its use of manufacturing towns, 7 mills, 2 foundries, and an arsenal, and to protect the vulnerable flank of William S. Rosecrans' Federal Army of the Cumberland, as it conducted operations against the Confederate Army of Tennessee in northern Alabama and Georgia. To counter these Union aims, the Confederacy sent an army to East Tennessee to wrest control of the region away from Burnside. Under the command of Lieutenant General James Longstreet, Confederate forces made a concerted effort to recover the region and destroy Burnside's army in November and December of 1863. The main battles occurred in Knoxville and determined the fate of the region throughout war's end. The Confederate commander was Lieutenant James Longstreet of the Confederate Forces of Knoxville, 1st Corps, Army of Northern Virginia. After defeating the Union Army of the Cumberland in the bloody Battle of Chickamauga, which was in September of 1863, and besieging the Federal survivors of the city of Chattanooga, Confederate Army of the Tennessee commander General Braxton Bragg turned his attention towards driving out Ambrose Burnside's Army of the Ohio out of Tennessee. Burnside had moved his armies from Kentucky to Knoxville on September 3rd of 63, following the Confederate abandonment of the city in August. The initial Confederate movements from the south and northeast overwhelmed the Union cavalry outpost at Philadelphia in October and Rogersville in November 5th, with a combined Union loss of over 1,100 men. On November 5th, a powerful command under James Longstreet began moving north from Chattanooga, combining both the power of and the experience necessary to rid the East Tennessee of Union occupiers. 2 veteran infantry divisions, Hood's and McLaw's, from the Army of the Northern Virginia, numbering more than 12,000 men, bolstered by 4,500 cavalry under General Joe Wheeler, that's a good name, and the artillery battalions of Colonel Porter and Alexander, who had 23 guns, and Major Austin Leedon, who had 12 guns under his command, began a slow, inexorable drive on the city. 3 weeks later, his force would be further reinforced by 2 infantry brigades from Simon B. Buckner's division. 8 days later, On November 13th, Longstreet divided his command at Sweetwater, sending Wheeler's cavalry across the Little Tennessee River, through Rockford and Maryville, to engage General William Sanders' Union Cavalry Division. Driving Sanders' cavalry before it, Wheeler's troopers moved to attack Knoxville's southern heights. Meanwhile, to complete the envelope of Burnside's army, Longstreet's rebel infantry and artillery force assembled a pontoon bridge west of Loudon, crossed the Tennessee River at Huff's Ferry on the night of the 14th, and began a 3-day drive that would bring it to the outskirts of Knoxville and the waiting guns of over 15,000 Union soldiers. Battle action around Knoxville, Tennessee, November 14th through the 29th, 1863. On November 14th, Confederate cavalry, 4,500 strong, under Joe Wheeler, split off from General James Longstreet's main force at Sweetwater and began to drive towards Knoxville's southern heights. Initial skirmishes with General Sanders' 1st Cavalry Division, U.S., occur along the Little Tennessee River at Maryville and at Rockford. On November 15th, the bulk of Sanders' 2,500-man cavalry division engages Wheeler's Confederate Cavalry Corps 5 miles south of Fort Dickerson at Stock Creek. A running 7-hour battle ends in front of Fort Dickerson, where Federal artillery and infantry fire combines with that of Sanders' cavalry to halt the rebel advance. On November 16th, the Confederate cavalry and its supporting horse artillery deploy before Fort Dickerson and engage in a brief exchange of fire with defending Union troops. Sanders dismounted 1st Cavalry and Colonel Cameron's brigade of infantry and 2 artillery batteries. The engagement ends when Wheeler determines that the reinforced Federal defense of Knoxville's southern heights is too strong to carry and withdraws his force. Total casualties, 200 Confederate and 213 USA. This is November 14th through the 16th. On November 17th and 18th, General Sanders' 3 cavalry brigades are recalled from their defensive positions on the southern heights and deploy as rear guard for the Federal infantry retreating from the battlefield at Campbell Station. In a final stand, Sanders blocks the Confederate advance by deploying Lieutenant Colonel Emory Bond's 700-man 2nd Cavalry Brigade astride of the Kingston Road, 1 mile west of Fort Sanders. Deployed across open fields from the river to the east of Tennessee and Georgia Railroad, Sanders' dismounted men repulse an assault by the 3rd South Carolina Infantry Regiment late on the afternoon of the 17th. A determined assault by much of Kershaw's South Carolina Infantry Brigade, supported by a brief preliminary artillery bombardment, dislodges Sanders' force on the afternoon of the 18th. Casualties, Confederate 138, North 152, including the mortal wounding of Sanders himself. On November 20th, the 17th Michigan Infantry Regiment makes a night sortie into the Third Creek Valley to burn a brick house being used by Confederate skirmishers. The Union Regiment is subjected to an intense artillery bombardment during their withdrawal to Federal lines. November 23rd, rebels sweep into the 9th Corps front near Clinton Road at 9 p.m. Retreating Union skirmishers set fire to numerous homes, machine shops, and a roundhouse located at the railroad depot. The roundhouse has been occupied by the Ordnance Department, and the detonation of a good deal of explosive material prevented any further advancement by the rebels. Casualties unknown. November 24th, ground lost on the 23rd along the Clinton Road was recovered by the advancing 48th Pennsylvania and the 21st Michigan Infantry Regiments, and driving the rebels back to their original lines. On November 24th, supported only by artillery fire from Fort Sanders, the 2nd Michigan Infantry Regiment makes an ill-conceived charge against the rebel rifle pits located near the railroad bed 600 yards north of the fort. In the process, half of the regiment is lost. U.S. casualties, 90. On November 20th, the 10th Georgia Infantry crosses the Holston River on a flatboard ferry and drives Union pickets off Cherokee Heights. On November 25th, the Battle of Armstrong Hill. To test the strength of Federal positions, the Confederates launch an assault against the portion of Knoxville's southern heights. The infantry brigades of Evander M. Law and Jerome Robertson, the 10th Georgia Infantry, and a brigade of cavalrymen serving as infantry due to the loss of their mounts, are supported by Captain Parker's artillery battle in an assault against the Federal positions on Armstrong's Hill, which is being manned by Colonel Daniel Cameron's brigade of infantry, supported by 8 guns, the 8 guns of H.T. Thomas and Kunkel's batteries. After 2 hours of fighting, the additional Warford's Federal cavalry lends sufficient strength to Cameron's position to repulse the Confederates. On November 29th, a second engagement is waged at Armstrong's Hill. Law's and Robertson's rebel brigades and Parker's artillery engage the 24th Kentucky and 65th Illinois of Cameron's brigade and the 104th of Ohio's Riley's brigade, supported by Thomas and Kunkel's batteries. This minimal rebel effort is readily resisted by the Federals. November 29th, the assault on Fort Sanders. In a final effort to break the Union defenses of Knoxville, Longstreet orders a major assault on Fort Sanders at dawn, November 29th, 1863. Following a brief artillery bombardment by approximately 17 guns, the Confederate infantry brigades of Wolford, Humphrey, Bryan, McLaw, and Anderson's division, supported by 3 additional brigades, assault the fort. Defended by the 480 Union troops and 12 pieces of artillery, the fort is protected by an abatis of felled trees, a tanglefoot of telegraph wire that had been stretched between dozens of tree stumps in front of the fort, and a deep ditch with near vertical walls and an icy parapet. Unable to penetrate the fort's walls, the 4,000 troops of the rebel assault force are horribly mauled, losing 813 men, which was, of course, 129 of them killed and 458 wounded, 226 captured and missing. In the battle, in just 20 minutes, the Federal defenders suffer a loss of only 13, 5 killed and 8 wounded. The epilogue. Within hours of the failed assault on Fort Sanders, Longstreet was notified by couriers from both Chattanooga and Virginia that Bragg's army of the Tennessee had been defeated by Ulysses S. Grant in the Battle of Missionary Ridge at Chattanooga. With the Confederate army in full retreat towards Dalton, Georgia, Grant dispatched 3 Federal columns totaling 25,000 men under the command of Tecumseh Sherman to march on Knoxville and relieve Burnside. Longstreet held his position until December 4th, then moved his army northeast to Russellville. The Confederates would winter over there, conducting occasional military operations against the Federals, and then rejoin Robert E. Lee in the spring in Virginia. The tenacious defense of Knoxville by Burnside's troops had saved the city for the Union. Knoxville would never be seriously threatened by the Confederates again, and would remain in Union hands throughout the end of the war.
The overlook where we are standing from peers across the placid turquoise waters of a pool called the Dickerson Quarry, which is 350 feet deep. History buffs will enjoy wandering over this historic Civil War era fort and stroll around the trails There are 2 picnic shelters, 3 cannons, and 4 miles of multiple nature trails.